Hello everyone, this is Manohar Reddy, Department of Cybersecurity, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. So today I am going to discuss about the concept of IARE model in database management system. In the previous sessions, we already discussed about the different types of data models, different types of levels of abstractions, different types of view levels, right? So those are all we discussed in the previous sessions. So now we are going to discuss the very important session of ER model, entity relation model. So entity relation model is one database design model. Entity relation model is one database design model to design the database software. To design the database software. So why we are saying that it is very important means we are going to design the software for achieving the data independency. To achieving the data independency. So definitely we required a proficient software to analyze them, right? So for this we are going to design the software based on the different models. In the different models, ER model is the very important model. We'll see how it works and how it contains actually. So concept of ER model, the name itself, ER stands for entity relationship model. Entity relationship model, and it is a high level data model. High level data model. Why we are saying that high level means it contains all the entities, attributes, relationships, and everything. So based on that, we are going to design the database, and based on the design of the database, we are going to store the values. So this model is used to define the data elements. That data elements are nothing but attributes, entities, and relationships for specified system, for specification of the system. And it develops a conceptual design for the database. So that is what we are saying, that to design the efficient database software, we require a high level model. So this model develops a conceptual design for the database. So that means it designs a basic idea of the database softwares and all. So based on that ideas only, the database is going to be designed. It also develops a very simple and easy to design view of data. So how you are going to see on the screen is going to be developed in very simple and clear way. Very simple and easy way. Right, and in ER modeling, the database structure is portrayed as a diagram called an entity relationship diagram. A diagram called an entity relationship diagram, that is nothing but ER diagram. So this ER diagram portrayed as a picture to design the database in clear and simple way, easy and simple way. So for example, ER model, we are taking an example for the school databases. So in this database, the student will be an entity. So we are taking that a student is an entity, because we are saying that ER model stands for what? Entity relationship model. So entity is the properties that contains all the real world object. Entities contains the properties that having the real world object. So this entity is the real world object, and which contains the different properties. That properties are like address, name, ID, age. The student is an entity which contains ID, which contains name, which contains address, and which contains age as the attributes to this student entity. So that address can be another entity with attributes like city, street name, pin code. City, street name, pin code. So here the name contains first name and last name as usual, and the age contains date of birth having, and the address contains the city of the location, and the street number of the location, and the landmark of the location. So we are having different types of attributes, and these all you can say that it is a properties that contains in the real world object. That real world object is nothing but entity. That real world object is nothing but entity. So student is an entity which contains, which shows the behavior for the address, age, name and ID. So these are all the properties for this real world object, and also you can say that these are all the attributes to this entity. Attributes to this entity. We'll see. So we are having a different types of ER model structure. We are having a different types of ER model structure. So ER model contains what? Entity, attributes and relationships. Entities, attributes and relationships. So an entity is nothing but what? A real world object that shows the behavioral properties. That shows the behavioral properties. And attribute is an property of the real world object, contains the entity. And a relation is nothing but the logical association or a logical connection between two entities or two attributes or two any entity to any attribute. So that is the logical association. This we can say that logical association or logical connection, you can say that logical association or logical connection. And this attribute is nothing but a property of the real world object, a property of real world object. And this is an object, real world object. Real world object contains properties, So definitely we have to understand this, all the entities, attributes and relations in this ER model. So we'll see what is meant by entity and what are the types of entities, and what is meant by attribute and the types of attributes, and what is meant by relation and types of relations. So from this, an entity is nothing but, we already said that entity is a real world object that contains the properties like name, ID, age and everything. So here the two types of entities will be there. One is weak entity and second one is strong entity. One is weak entity and second one is strong entity, right? And attributes contains, there are four types of attributes, and key attributes and composite attribute, multi-valued attribute and derived attribute. So these four are the attributes that shows the behavior, to this entity, and the relations. So connections between two entities or two things or two persons or anything, you can say. So relations can have the different ways: one-to-one relationship, one-to-many relationship, many-to-one relationship, and many-to-many relationship. So among this all the entities, attributes and relationships, with this all we are going to design an efficient software to utilizing in simple and easy way. So we'll see what is meant by entity and what are the different types of entities actually. So here weak entity and strong entities will be there. So see here. So ER model, entity. So what is meant by entity? Entity may be an object. Entity may be any object. That is nothing but a real world object, and a class and a person or place. You can say anything, any object which is a class, which is a person, which is a place. In the ER diagram, an entity can be represented as rectangles. In entity represented as a rectangle. So wherever we can see the rectangled text, we can say that it is an entity. Wherever we can see the rectangled text, that is called as an entity. So consider an organization is an example. Manager, product, employee, department, these are all the different entities if we can take, that can be taken as an entity. So here this employee is one entity and this department is one entity. So among these two entities, whatever the representation is presented here is nothing but a relationship. So that's why we already noted that a relationship is nothing but a logical association between two entities. These two entities or two attributes or entity to attribute. We can say that any way. We can say that it is in any way. So here, consider for this example, employee and department. Employee and department, these two are entities because these are the objects and these two objects shows the behavior. So employee shows the behavior for the department and department shows the behavior for the employee. So here how we can say employee works for the department, department gives and work to the employee. Employee works for the department and department gives the works to employee. So here the relationship is important. Without this relationship, we can't understand what is the relation between this employee and the department. So definitely we have to mention that relation. So that mentioning that relation, we understood that employee works for department or else department gives works to the employee. So this is the way we can understand for the relationship among the two entities, right? And see what are the different types of entities. We already noted that one is weak entity and the second one is a strong entity. So what is meant by weak entity and what is meant by strong entity? So an entity that depends on another entity is called as a weak entity. So in generally, a person is depending on another person is called as weak person, maybe, right? So the same way, an entity that depends on another entity is called as a weak entity. So from this example, a loan is one entity and installment is one entity. So installment will comes when you are applying for the loan only. When you are having the loan, you have to pay the installments wise, right? So that means indirectly installment is depending on the loan that you have applied or that you have taken the loan. So loan is an main entity and that entity is depending that installment entity is depending on loan entity. So the weak entity is represented with a doubled rectangle. So that means weak entity is depending on a strong entity, that means a normal entity, loan entity. So the loan can have the weak entities and strong entities. So here the entity installment entity is to be weak entity because it is depending on loan, the amount of loan you have taken. So whenever you taken the loan amount, you have to pay the installments wise, right? So that installment is an weak entity, and we represented that a weak entity in the form of doubled rectangles. So the weak entity is represented by a double rectangle. And strong entity. So strong entity is not a weak entity. First of all, strong entity is not a weak entity and it is a primary key. Why we are saying that it is a primary key? So the all primary keys are the key attributes for all the other attributes. Primary keys are key attributes for all the other attributes. So that's why we said that strong entity has a primary key. And it does not depend on any other entity. Suppose you can take a student or college. The ID is the main strong entity because the number, the phone number and everything, age and everything will have to insert the data based on this ID. So because of that, ID is said to be primary key and it is said to be a strong entity. Because of that, ID is said to be primary key as well as ID is said to be strong entity. And it can be represented using single rectangle with a thickness, and also you can say that a thick rectangle. You can also represent it with a thick rectangle. So the strong entity is represented with a thick rectangle. That means it doesn't depend on any other entity. It is a strong. It doesn't any depending on any other entities. So the relationship between two strong entities can be represented using a single diamond diamond. So suppose student and the college. College comes to the student comes to the college, and this representation, what? This representation is nothing but a relationship between two entities. This representation is showing that a relationship between these two entities, student and the college. So that is what we have noted here, and it can either have a total participation or no participation. That strong entity doesn't doesn't shows any total participation or no participation. If it requires, it shows the participation. If it doesn't require, it doesn't shows the participation. So like the way we have to understand the entities types. So one is weak entity and the second one is strong entity. The weak entity, we have said that the entity is depending on another entity, but strong entity is not depending on any other entity. And the weak entity is represented with rectangle, double rectangle, and the strong entity is represented with thick rectangle. This is about entities and the types of entities. And next one, attributes. So what is meant by attribute and what are the different types of attributes we have seen. The attribute is used to describe the property of an entity. So we already said that entity is the real world object and that shows the property or behavior of the property, right? So from here, the attribute is used to describe the property of an entity. Describe the property of an entity. Student can have the name, student can have the age, student can have the ID. So ID, name, age, all, or you can say that it is a properties. So that property is nothing but attribute here. So we mentioned that it is represented, eclipse is used to represent an attribute. So each and every attribute is represented in the symbol of eclipse, So for example, ID, age, contact number, name, etc. can be attributes of a student. So the first one is what? Types of attributes, we said that. So this is the example. Student is an entity which contains the attributes ID, phone number, name, and age. ID, phone number, name, and age. These four are the attributes of this student entity. So now coming to this first type of key attribute. The key attribute is used to represent the main characteristics of an entity. So the key attribute is used to represent the main characteristic, main property, main characteristic, main behavior of an entity. So student can hold the phone number, age, name, and all based on the one attribute. That attribute is nothing but key attribute. And also it is said to be primary key. So it represents a primary key. So the key attribute is represented by an eclipse with the text underlined. So we taken the example, student is here, student contains phone number, student contain age, student contains name, and students contain ID. But the ID is underlined text because all these three fields, phone number, age, and name, are depending on this field. So that's why we can say that this ID is a primary key as well as it is a main key attribute. So this is the key attribute. So all the other attributes like phone number, age, name are depending on the ID. Is having that ID is a key attribute. So how we are representing that key attributes? We are representing the key attribute with the help of underlined text with the eclipse. Symbol. So this is about key attribute, right? And we'll see the next two attributes, composite attribute and multi-valued attribute. So composite attribute, so the name itself composite, it generates multiple attributes. So see here, an attribute that composed of many other attributes known as composite attributes. So one attribute can generates decomposed or composed, you can say anyway. So that attribute is composing in many ways, composing in many attributes. So that is nothing but the composite attribute. One attribute can compose it in many ways. One attribute can compose it in many ways is called as composite attribute. And this composite attribute is represented by eclipse, and those eclipse are connected with an eclipse symbol, main attribute. So composite attribute is nothing but generating attributes the same different ways. Suppose from this example we understood that name is an one attribute actually, but name can generate or composed in first name of the student name, middle name of the student name, as well as last name of the student name. So the name is one attribute actually. So name is one attribute, but it composes in many ways. It generates or it composes in many ways. That many ways is nothing but first name, middle name, last name. First name, middle name, last name. So these three are, you can say that, composite attributes. These three are nothing but composite attributes. We can represent that in eclipse way, but they are connected to each other from the main attribute, from the main attribute name. So name is a composite attribute. We can say that name is a composite attribute which generates multiple attributes like first name, middle name, and last name. First name, middle name, and last name. These three are the generated or sequenced attributes from this composite attribute. That is what we understand from here. And multi-valued attributes. So an attribute can have more than one value. So generally a person can have more than one mobiles, more than one dresses, more than one anything, right? But these like the way, so an attribute can have more than one values. An attribute can have more than one values. So composite attribute means more than one generated attributes. But multi-valued, the name itself, an attribute generates multiple values. So an attribute can have more than one values. These attributes are known as multi-valued attribute. These attributes are nothing but multi-valued attributes. That means attributes generates multiple values. So example, we have seen that a phone number for the student 1, can have not only single number, it can have multiple phone numbers. Similarly, a student can have not only a student can register not only for single course, student can register for multiple courses. The same way, a student can join in not only one event, he can join in multiple events, multiple sports, multiple transportation. So like the way we understood that an attribute which generates multiple values. So here it shows that double eclipse, it represented in the form of double eclipse. So multi-valued attribute represented in the form of doubled eclipse symbol. So this is the phone number can have multiple values, so multiple values are representing this doubled rectangle or doubled eclipse. So doubled eclipse are nothing but multi-valued attribute, right? And next one is derived attribute. So derived means an attribute can deriving some properties from the previous attributes. An attribute can deriving or generating some properties from previous attributes. So here an attribute that can be derived from other attribute is known as derived attribute. So one attribute can derive some behavior, derive some property from other attribute. is nothing but derived attribute. It can be represented by a dashed eclipse. Dashed eclipse. So dashed eclipse. So for example, a person's age changes over time and can be derived from another attributes like date of birth. So depending upon the date of birth and year, the student age can be changes. Student age can be changes or person age can be changes, right? So and every year the age will be incremented by one and changes by one, right? So this age is depending on what date of birth. This age is depending on what date of birth. So every year the date of birth from the starting year will be changed by incrementing the years or incrementing the one and the next years. So student contains name, student contains roll number, student contains birth date, but this birth date is a super attribute for this derived attribute, because this age attribute is deriving property from date of birth value or date of birth attribute. So whenever the date of birth is changing, the date of birth year is incrementing 1 year and incrementing 2 years, automatically age will be changes. So the age is a derived property, derived attribute for the birth date, and it represented in the form of dashed eclipse. So this is the derived attribute, right? And we'll see the next relationship types. So relation is nothing but what we already said, that relation is nothing but a logical association or logical connection between two or more entities or two or more attributes or two or more entities, two attributes, right? So we'll see. A relationship is used to describe the relation between two entities. So teacher is one entity and student is also one entity. But in between the teacher and student, the relation is what? Teaches. So this diamond symbol representation is what? Relation. So teacher teaches lessons to the student. Similarly, student listen teaching from the teacher. Teacher teaches lessons to the student. Student lessons from teacher, right? So that is nothing but teacher to the student relationship. So from this point of view, we can see different types of relationships. What? So first one is what? One-to-one relationship. And the second one is what? One-to-many relationship. And third one is what? Many-to-one relationship. And the fourth one is what? Many-to-many relationship. See, first of all, one-to-one relationship. So one-to-one is nothing but only one entity and only one instance. That means these two entities having the one instance. So from the left side as well as from the right side. So left side of female instance is one, and the right side male side is only one instance. So see here, when only one instance of an entity is associated with the relationship, then it is known as one relationship. That means from the two entities, they are having only one instance, only one base, only one behavior. So that is nothing but a one-to-one relationship. So when only one instance of an entity is associated with relationship, then it is known as only one-to-one relationship. So one entity is from the left side and the second entity is from the right side. But those two entities having the only one instance. So female is relation like a female, only one female is married to only one male. Similarly, one male is married to one female. That means the two entities, female and male, those two entities are having only one instance. So that is nothing but one-to-one relationship. one relationship. Similarly, you can take like a student. Student is one entity, and the college is one entity. Student joins. Student joins. Here the relationship is what? Joins. So student joins in a college is one instance, and the college joins student is one instance. Means the same type of student can join in the same type of college. Only one student can join one college, right? The same way, the same colleges and the same students will join in the itself. So that is nothing but only one instance from the left side and one instance from the right side. We have to indicate this instance. So from the left side one instance and right side one instance. So that's why you can say that only one to one relationship. One to one relationship. And the second one is what? One to many relationship. One to many relationships. That means from the left side, from the left entity and from the right entity. So see here, when only one instance of the entity of the left and more than one instance of an entity on the right associates with the relationship, then this is known as one to many relationship. One to many relationship. So for example, one person, scientist is one person from the left side, and he can invents more than one inventions, more than one projects, or more than one products. He can invent more than one inventions. So a scientist can invent more than one process or more than one products. You can say anything. So he invents more things, and he invents more projects, more develops or more inventions. So the scientist is one instance, and inventions is another instance, but he can right side instance is multiple instance. So the only one instance of the left from the entity and more than one instances from the right side, right entity is associated means related. These two are associated, then it is called as one to many relationship. One to many relationship. So one entity from the left side can have more than one entities from the right side, more than one entities from the right side. So that it is called as one to many relationships. And similarly, many to one relationship. So when more than one instance of an entity on the left side, so many to one means from the left side many, on the right side only one instance. So we will see the example here. So many to one relationship. So when more than one instance of the entity on the left side, suppose we can take an example, student. Multiple students can enroll the single course. Multiple students can enroll for the single course. That means the number of students, the number of instances from the left side can have the only one instance of the right side. Number of students can have the left instance of the left side is going to take the more than only one course of the right side. So students can have multiple instances from the left side, having the right side only one instance. So then it is said to be many to one relationship. So see here, when more than one instance of entity on the left side, that is nothing but student side, and only one instance of an entity on the right associate with the relationship, then it is known as many to one relationship. So from the left side many instances and the right side only one instances. So many to one is nothing but this many to one relationship. Those many instances are related with a single instance. So then it is said to be many to one instance. And last one is what? Many to many relationship. Many to many relationship. So in this, many employees can working for many projects, or many projects are assigned to many employees. So many projects are assigned to many employees, as well as many employees were working for many projects. So when more than one instance of an entity on the left side, so from this we can understand that what? Multiple instances from the left side are going to be related with multiple instances of the right side. Multiple instances of the left side is going to be related with the multiple instances of the right side. So then the relationship is going to be assigned as many to many relationship. Many to many relationship. See here, when more than one instance of entity in the left side and more than one instance of an entity on the right side is associated with the relationship, then it is known as what? Many to many relationship. So here the example is what? Employee can assigned by many projects and the projects can have many employees. That means indirectly employees are working for many projects as well as a project is assigned for many employees. An employee is working for many projects as well as a project can assign to multiple and many employees. So like the way we can understand that the relationship between many to many relationship. So overall, these are all the relationship types. We have to understand that what an entities, two entities can have the relationship, and these entities are represented with a single rectangle, and this relationship is represented with a diamond symbol, and these two are connected for the two entities. These two are the connected with two entities. So this is what we have to understand from this relationship. So we'll see what we discussed from the from this session. So see here, we understood what ER model actually. So from this ER model, what is meant by entity, what is meant by strong entities, types of entities, what is meant by attribute, what are the types of attributes, what is meant by relation, what are the types of relations and all. So from this we understand that what types of entities are two types, strong entities and weak entity. So from this all the session we have to understand that what representations of the symbols and how they are related with the all other entities, So see here, weak entity is represented with a double rectangle, weak entity is represented with a double rectangle. So before that, entity is represented with a single rectangle actually, but weak entities are represented with double rectangle, and a strong entity is represented with a thick rectangle. This is what we have to understand. So the representation of the symbols are very important to understand these entity types, right? And this is the weak entity and this is the strong entity. And from this attributes, so attribute shows the behavior and it represents eclipse symbol, right? Eclipse symbol. And from this key attribute, so key attribute, how we are representing, we understood that it is underlined with the text with the eclipse symbol. Underlined with the text with the eclipse symbol. And the composite attribute is nothing but we can generate multiple eclipses. So multiple values, and you can say that. And multi-valued attribute. So multi-valued attribute is nothing but how it shows multiple values. It is going to be having multiple values. That means the representation of the symbol is what? Double eclipse. So double eclipse. And derived attribute. So derived attribute is nothing but what? The attribute can derive the properties from the previous attribute. That is nothing but super attribute. So it shows the behavior from the senior attributes or super attributes. So how it represents actually? It represents a dashed eclipse. So these are the types of attributes that represented in the symbols. And relation, one-to-one relations. So in one-to-one relations, actually a relation is symbol is represented with this diamond symbol. This diamond symbol associated with entities, associated with these two entities, right? And from the one-to-one, we have to mention that left side is one instance and the right side is many instance. That many is also you can represent it in the form of a star symbol. Also you can mention in the star symbol. That is nothing but one to many, one to one, right? One to one is nothing but only one instance from the left side and one instance from the right side. And the same way one to many. So one to many. So one instance from the left side and many instance from the right side. One instance from the left side and many instance from the right side. And similarly many to one. So many to one also many instances from the left side and only one instance from the right side. Many instances from the left side and one instance is from the right side. And you can also symbolize that many is nothing but star indicates. You can indicate many is nothing but star also, and many to many also. Many to many is nothing but many instances from the left side as well as many instances from the right side. Many instances from the left side as well as many instances from the right side. So these are all the symbols. These are all the symbols that you are going to represent as a relations, as a attributes, as an entity, as an entity. So this is all about ER model. So ER model diagrams. So ER model is a very high level model that designs different database softwares with the help of these entities, attributes, along with all the relationship. And this model is also used to design the database in simple way and a easy way. In simple way and a easy way. So this is all about ER model. Right. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.